Overwatch, Counter-Strike, Valorant, Rainbow Six Siege, Street Fighter 6, Guilty Gear Strive. These games all have one thing in common. These are competitive games. While you certainly can enjoy these games casually through things like alternate game modes, or sometimes even single player, these games are clearly made with the intent of being competitive. This aspect of the game is tuned by things like balance patches or new characters that shake up the game's meta, the most effective tactic available. For some people, the meta is exactly what they try to aim for. For competitive esports players, their level of success is dictated by how well they are able to bring themselves and their character to the highest level of competition. They'll spend hours grinding things like combos, spacing, flicking, spraying, lineups, and more so that they can increase their chances of victory to its highest potential. But for others, not so much. What happens when the meta comes at the cost of fun? Isn't fun the whole reason to play video games to begin with? That topic right there is exactly what I'm here to cover with you today. This is what competitive game devs don't understand, which is that balance should never come at the cost of fun. Just so you know where I'm coming from, I've been playing these quote-unquote competitive games for years, with mainly fighting games and FPS being the center focus. My journey started with Counter-Strike back in 2014, but even before that, there was Team Fortress 2. This game is still my most played game on Steam. It's probably the reason I even have an account. This is also a game that has received numerous balance patches, weapons, maps and map adjustments, and more, and let's be honest, some of the balance patches and whatnot were questionable, but there's a reason the game has a community size that surely any game dev would kill to have, especially over a dozen years later. That's because the game, first and foremost, was made to be fun. The game has all kinds of variety with different weapon compositions, classes, cosmetics, game modes, community servers, community tours, and more that are all meant to do one thing, which is keep the game fun. It's my firm belief that one of the key factors in keeping a game fun is variety. The more that you introduce new options and ways to play the game, the more that players will want to come back to it in order to explore those new options. They'll want to come back in order to explore those new ways and techniques to play the game so that way they can reinvent the way they play it. Well, so long as you keep it consistent. TF2 has added dozens of new weapons and balance patches, but at the end of the day, the game still has the same 9 classes, and the added weapons simply give you new ways to go about the same flow of the game. Scout still goes fast, Medic still heals, and Engineer still builds things. Alterations have been made here and there, but it isn't done in a way that hampers the flow of how the game is played on a daily basis. It still keeps the game fun by adding fresh new content, but it also doesn't hamper the player who comes to try and master the game's mechanics and improve their understanding of the game. Have you ever heard of the term gameplay loop? It's basically meant to describe how the game is played on a daily basis. In chess, the gameplay loop is described as how exactly you use your pieces to capture the opponents. In volleyball, it's about how you knock the ball into your opponent's side of the field. And in Counter-Strike, it's about how the terrorists deliver the bomb to the site and how the CTs defend and stop them from doing so. My theory is that fun comes when the player comes to master this gameplay loop.
First, get your facts straight, then distort them at your leisure.
Leisure sure is a fitting word. Sure, you can learn that the fighting gameplay loop is to put the opponent's health bar to 0 without letting them do the same thing to you. But then imagine the possibilities once you start learning to apply things like combos, spacing, space traps, air combos, and better movement in order to make yourself better at the game. Doing that kind of stuff has its own reward. Balance patches, characters, and mechanics can be applied in order to improve or slightly alter this gameplay loop. Adding more options and keeping things fresh can allow your players to relearn the game just by shifting the gears a little bit. But what happens when you change the gameplay loop too much? Something like this can be like trying to reinvent the wheel, basically. What happens when you take what players have been doing for months or years and then suddenly you choose to break the loop? Take a look at Overwatch, for instance. This game came out as a 6v6 multiplayer hero shooter. You could freely pick between any combination of tank, DPS, and support heroes in order to form your team composition. Balance patches and new characters came out periodically, with some being more contentious than others. Eventually, there was a time when the meta became so strong and so centralizing that there was the dreaded GOATS meta all over pro play. It was the exact same team composition aiming for the same goal, and it made the game one-dimensional and extremely unfun. In fact, this is exactly when I dropped the game. But at the same time, you could still hook up your system and still play the exact same game that you had paid for. Getting in and out of it wasn't a problem. But now imagine you wake up one day and I told you the game is now role locked. 2 characters per role. Don't want to play tank? Too bad. Someone has to do it. And then what if we move even further into the future and now the game is completely different with no option to go back to the original. Now, guess what? There's only one tank. The role lock still exists otherwise, so if you don't want to play support, I guess you need to suck it up. Oh, also, you know what I said about options? Wouldn't it be great to have the option to play a PvE game mode in a hero shooter with yourself or with friends? Sorry, buddy. Cancelled. Or let's take a look at another example.
The base.
There's another one there. Yeah. Oh. Montage. Hold on. I'm trying to help you out, Bull. I'm watching kitchen.
Let's get in lobby.
Kitchen.
There's still a Legion. That's a Legion. Let's get his kitchen, right? Sure.
1, 2, 3.
There you go. Hey kids. Lit for like 60.
Op 4 eliminated. Op 4 last op standing. Op 4 eliminated. Located a bomb.
All over the fire turban.
Op 4 last op standing.
Jesus Christ.
Op 4 neutralized.
I mean, look at that. That footage is from Rainbow Six Siege, about 7 years ago. And then let's take a look at the game now. It takes 10 years to ADS. You have gadgets that essentially take control away from the player, and there's so many operators that finding the gameplay loop can take literal weeks. And just when you think you've got the hang of it, boom, now your favorite entry fragger is a 1-speed operator. I'm sure everyone is gonna love that. Oh. This is the problem that frustrates your longtime players. Longtime players of the game will spend years trying to get used to and master the ebb and flow of the game if they like it. If they like it, then there are chances that they'll encourage new players to come in and try and do the same. So as a developer, if you randomly flip this on its head without good reason, then it breaks the flow and forces them to relearn the game, which they may or may not want to do. In fact, let's talk about balance patches really quick. Balance patches are a scary thing. Tell me, do you like getting command grabbed by Potemkin and losing half your health bar in a single hit where you can't even burst? Or do you like getting opt down long A and losing the round from an angle that's as long as a football field? Do you like getting zoned out in a fighting game that's just, come on, unfair? Probably not. Does this mean you should nerf these playstyles? I don't think so. Instead, what game developers should focus on is opening up new ways in order to firmly counter these playstyles. That's why things like rushdown characters and flashbangs and smokes exist, because without them, the game would be one-dimensional and less fun. This is why the AWP has become a staple in Counter-Strike as a way to hold defensive angles and take long-range fights. This is also why grapplers and zoners can coexist in a fighting game. If zoning tactics didn't exist in a fighting game, then there would be no way to stop Potemkin from taking you to heaven. And without grapplers or rushdowns, then the game would become a full-screen staring contest. This also stems into why I think nerfs are overall worse than buffs. We're gonna take one last look at Counter-Strike, I promise. Since the game's conception, the M4, AK, and AWP have been the staples of the game's weapon pool. This is because they can be used at virtually any range, are consistent, and reward the player for improving their mechanics like spray control, crosshair placement, flicks, and more. This sounds pretty boring, right? The same 3 guns have been in charge ever since Counter-Strike began over 2 decades ago. Surely they need nerfs, right? No. Remember that thing I said about reinventing the wheel? Imagine you sat down to play a game of chess, right? This is a game that has been the way it is for far longer than Counter-Strike. But then imagine you sit down and suddenly I say all your pawns are now queens! That would be absolute chaos, wouldn't it? It would really undervalue the actual queen you get as well, which is meant to be your most powerful and versatile piece, which is why you only get one. It makes the queen feel more impactful when it's lost, and it's meant to make power plays on your opponent that simply no other piece can. But going back to Counter-Strike, yes, the game is dominated by these 3 rifles. Valve did indeed see this as something that's a bit too over-centralizing. And let's see how they went about this. Did they decide to nerf the 3 main rifles? I mean, they kinda nerfed the AWP, but that's beside the point. Or did the geniuses at Valve decide to buff other weapons instead? They looked towards the scoped weapons, the AUG and SG-553. For the record, these 2 guns were secretly OP for years and I can't believe nobody noticed. Anyway, rather than nerfing the M4 and AK to make these weapons more popular, instead, all they had to do was reduce the price. This fixed the apparent main reason that nobody was using these 2 weapons besides community perception, which was their higher price tag. This led to far more people choosing to use the weapons instead of only choosing the M4 and AK. It expanded the gameplay loop, rather than narrowing the viable gun pool by nerfing the mainstay rifles. This all coagulates in my final point, which is that game balance should never come at the cost of fun. It should never come at the cost of over-centralizing your game by removing options and making it boring. There will always be a best gun. There will always be a best character. There will always be a meta. Your game will never be truly balanced. So why focus on that, and why not just focus on making the game fun? Fun is way more important than balance. You know what game is balanced? This one. This game is called Footsies. There's no first turn advantage like chess, no. Both players are on the exact same playing field, playing the exact same character with the exact same moveset, using the exact same one-button inputs. There's no advantage to be had. Neither player has a bad matchup or OP mechanics, no. If you lose, it's purely on you. I don't mean any shade towards Footsies, it's actually kind of dumb fun. But this is an example of how, in an effort to make a game that's balanced, you make the game rather bleak by toning down all the mechanics in order to put both players on even playing fields, and it leads to less room for creativity and player expression. Look, I'm a Guilty Gear player, so trust me when I say that I know what bullshit looks like. But at the end of the day, isn't the bullshit in the game part of what makes it fun? And I'll say it again, fun is more important than balance. As Sir Swag would say,
have fun and embrace the bullshit.